The kneeling warrior. The ruins of the coastal outpost were silent except for the hiss of fire and the distant roll of waves. The battle had ended an hour ago, but the air still trembled with heat. Ayan moved through the wreckage slowly, rifle steady against his shoulder, boots crunching on burnt glass. His visor flickered with motion readings that came and went like ghosts. Somewhere in the rubble, something was alive and afraid. He could feel it more than see it. The way the air carried the faint hum of alien armor struggling to restart its power core. He followed that sound through a cracked corridor until he saw her. The alien was kneeling in the ash, her weapon broken, one arm sparking from the shoulder joint. The strange metallic plates of her armor glowed faintly blue as if trying to heal themselves. She raised her head when she heard his steps and her eyes widened. They were not monstrous like the news feeds had shown. They were bright and clear, almost human, but edged with light. She spoke through a voice translator that buzzed like a wasp in the smoke. "Do not kill me, human," she said. "I will not fight." Ayan did not lower his weapon. He had seen traps before. Enemies who begged for mercy and exploded the moment you looked away. But there was something in the way she said it that made him pause. The translator was shaking as it caught each word, but behind the static he could hear a tone of exhaustion and surrender. She placed her other hand on the ground and lowered her head further. "I am Taurus of the Vakari Legion. I surrender. I will serve if you spare me." Her voice faltered and she looked up again, her breath visible in the hot air as if her suit tried to cool itself from the inside. "I will warm your bed if you must claim me," she said quietly. "Just do not kill me." Ayan blinked behind his visor. The line made no sense to him at first. He realized it was probably an old Vakari phrase, a vow of loyalty or submission, but the translator had rendered it word for word. He felt the weight of her meaning even if it sounded strange. He stepped closer, eyes scanning her suit for traps. There were none. Her power pack was nearly dead, the heat signature fading fast. He spoke through his helmet mic. "Drop all weapons. Keep your hands visible." She obeyed instantly. Her broken rifle clattered against the floor. She pulled a short blade from her belt and laid it beside her knees. He motioned for her to stay still while he called in. Command responded with static first, then the calm voice of Captain Mira. "Copy. Ranger 2, what is your status?" Ayan answered quietly. "One survivor, enemy combatant, unarmed, claims surrender." Mira's voice hardened. "You are authorized to terminate." "No transport available." Ayan looked at Taurus again. She was barely breathing now, her armor systems shutting down one by one. He thought about the last weeks of fighting, about the burned towns and empty villages. He thought about the stories of Vakari cruelty. Then he saw the fear in her eyes, and it did not look like cruelty. It looked like someone who had lost everything. "Negative," he said. "I'm bringing her in." Mira paused on the line. "That's against standing order." Ayan answered. "Maybe the order's wrong." There was silence for several seconds, then Mira sighed. "You have 1 hour. If she's a trick, it's on you." Ayan nodded, though she could not see it. "Copy that." He approached Taurus carefully and knelt beside her. Her breathing slowed, but her gaze stayed locked on his. "Why?" she asked softly. "Why do you spare me?" He checked her wounds, pulling a small med pack from his belt. "Because you asked," he said simply. She stared as if he had spoken something sacred. As he patched the wound near her shoulder, she whispered things that the translator half broke into fragments. She spoke of her people, the Vakari, who saw warmth as a symbol of life's worth. In her world, warriors shared heat during storms to prove trust. When she said she would warm his bed, she had meant to offer her life, her service, her loyalty. It was not a plea born of shame, but of custom. Ayan listened quietly, understanding now that mercy could carry its own kind of power. He lifted her arm over his shoulder and guided her toward the exit. Outside, the wind carried the smell of salt and ash. The sun was setting red over the ocean, and the air shimmered with heat. He half carried her through the sand until they reached a patrol crawler hidden in the dunes. She looked at the sky and said, "Your world is loud. It burns and sings at the same time." He smiled faintly. "You get used to it." She tilted her head as if trying to understand humor. When they reached the crawler, he eased her inside and locked the hatch. During the drive back to the outpost, she spoke again. "You are not like the others. Most humans fire without speech." Ayan kept his eyes on the desert road. "Maybe that's why I'm still alive." She leaned back and closed her eyes. "My people will not forgive this. You kept me when I should have died. That will make you dangerous to them." He did not answer right away. He was thinking about what that meant. Then he said, "Good." Let them remember that mercy can be dangerous too. By the time they reached the outpost, night had fallen. The sky was full of cold stars and silent drones circling above. The guards at the gate looked at him in shock when they saw the alien beside him. Mira came out of the command hut, her expression unreadable. "You actually did it," she said. Ayan nodded. "She's hurt but stable. She can talk." Mira looked at Taris, then at him. "You realize what this means?" Ayan answered. "Yeah. It means we stop guessing what they think, we ask." Mira exhaled slowly and waved them inside. The alien warrior lowered her head again in the same kneeling posture as before. But this time Ayan lifted her by the arm. "You don't kneel here," he said. "We stand." She looked confused for a second, then straightened her back and stood beside him. In the flickering light of the outpost lamps, the first bridge between their worlds began with that small act of standing side by side. Chains and choices. The outpost was a cluster of low buildings made from sand-colored composites and covered with solar tarps that fluttered in the night wind. Inside the command room, the hum of machines mixed with the quiet tension of soldiers, watching an enemy walk among them. Taris moved slowly between the walls lined with maps and monitors. Her armor was gone now, replaced by a loose gray uniform that hung awkwardly on her tall frame. She walked barefoot as if the ground of this world still felt strange beneath her feet. Every eye followed her and every hand hovered near a trigger. Captain Mira stood by the central table, arms crossed, her gaze sharp. She did not speak at first, letting the silence stretch until even the air felt heavy. Ayan stood beside Taris, ready to take responsibility. He knew what the others were thinking because he had thought it too, before the moment she had begged for mercy. Mira finally spoke, her voice even but cold. "You brought her here against order," she said. "She could have been a trap." Ayan answered quietly. "She could have been, but she wasn't." Mira studied Taris for a long moment, then motioned for her to sit. The alien obeyed, moving with careful grace, her long limbs folding neatly as she sat on the floor. Her skin shimmered faintly in the light, a pale metallic tone that shifted with every breath. Mira tapped the table projector, and a blue image appeared above it showing a map of the region dotted with enemy positions. She pointed to a red cluster near the coast. "Your people hit this relay last night," she said. "We lost 3. Taris lowered her head. "I know," she said softly. "They were told the humans had fortified the point with civilians as shields." Mira's eyes flashed. "And you believed that?" Taris looked up, meeting her gaze. "Belief is not allowed in the Legion," she said. "Orders are." Ayan saw something flicker in Mira's expression. Not sympathy exactly, but the understanding of a soldier who had followed impossible commands before. Ayan stepped closer. "She says there is a larger force moving inland. We need to know where." Mira turned to him and said, "And you think she will just tell us because you spared her?" Taris looked between them and spoke before he could answer. "I will tell you," she said, "but you must understand what you ask. The Vakari follow a creed. We respect strength and warmth. Mercy is warmth. Strength is truth. If you lie to me, I will know, and I will die before helping you." Mira frowned. "You expect us to play by your code?" Taris nodded slowly. "If you wish to survive my people, yes." The room was silent except for the faint buzz of power conduits. One of the younger soldiers muttered under his breath that the alien should not be trusted. Ayan ignored him. He crouched beside Taris, keeping his voice calm. "Then teach us your code," he said. "Tell us how they think, how they plan." She hesitated, then began to explain. The Vakari, she said, came from a world of storms and frozen deserts. For generations they fought over heat and light. To share warmth even for a night meant alliance. To take it by force meant war. When the first spacefarers left their planet, they carried that culture into the stars. They believed every world they found must either join their fire or be consumed by it. When they came to Earth, they thought they saw another cold world needing rule. Mira listened without interruption. "So this conquest," she said, "it's not hate. It's habit." Taris nodded. "And habit can be broken, but only by something stronger than fear." Ayan glanced at Mira and saw that she understood the opportunity, though she hid it behind her hard face. He said quietly, "She offered to guide us away from an ambush. If we can confirm that information, we can hit their supply line instead." Mira turned back to Taris. "Why help us?" The alien took a slow breath. "Because your ranger showed me mercy and my creed demands." "I return warmth for warmth," she said. "Because my commander would rather burn a city than speak, and I have seen what burning does." Mira looked down at the map again, and after a long silence she said, We move at dawn. You will come with us. One wrong move, and you're done. Taris bowed her head. Understood. The meeting ended and the soldiers scattered to prepare. Ayan followed Taris to the storage room where she would sleep. It was small with a cot and a heater glowing in the corner. She touched the metal wall and murmured something in her own tongue, then turned to him. You risk much for me, she said. He shrugged. I've risked more for less. She tilted her head, studying him. You fight without hate. That is rare among soldiers. He answered. Sometimes hate gets you killed faster. She nodded slowly and sat on the cot. Will your people trust me? Not yet, he said. Maybe not ever. But if you keep your word, they'll have to listen. Outside, the wind grew stronger and sand rattled against the windows. Ayan stayed a moment longer, watching her eyes reflect the heater's orange glow. He wondered what kind of life she had before the Legion, how many times she had knelt like that night, and survived by surrendering to a stronger force. She caught his gaze and said softly, In my world, the one who spares is the one who holds power. You could have killed me and ended my shame, but instead you gave me a new one. He frowned. What do you mean? She smiled faintly. Now I must live to earn your mercy. The next morning before sunrise, the unit gathered in the yard. The sky was still black, but a pale line of light grew over the horizon. Mira checked her rifle and gave short, sharp orders. Taris wore a human jacket over her uniform and carried no weapon. She pointed at the holographic map on Ayan's wrist. The ambush is here, she said, by the salt flats. If you move through the ravine before the second sun rises, they will not see you. Mira looked skeptical but nodded. If this works, you might just buy yourself a place in this world, she said. Taris met her eyes. I do not need a place, she said. Only a promise that mercy is not a lie. They moved out before dawn, engines humming softly. Ayan drove the lead crawler while Taris watched the horizon. She spoke quietly about her people's ships in orbit and how they measured battle by temperature changes instead of casualties. To them, Earth's heat was wild and beautiful and terrifying. Ayan listened without interrupting. He realized then that the war might never have been about conquest alone, but about misunderstanding a world that burned too bright for them to handle. As the first light touched the sand, she turned to him and said, if we survive today, the fire between our worlds might become something new. He did not answer, but in that silence, both of them understood that choices made in mercy can reshape even the oldest chains. Ambush turned inside out. The desert at dawn was a pale gold mirror stretching to the horizon with waves of heat rising. Even before the sun had cleared the ridge, the human convoy moved in silence through the narrow ravine, each vehicle cloaked in dust and static camouflage. Ayan drove the lead crawler, eyes fixed on the sensor display that flickered with faint readings. Ahead beside him, Taris studied the same data, her long fingers moving across the console, translating the shifting energy fields into something the humans could understand. Her expression was tense but steady. She had warned them that the Vakari ambush would come here near the salt flats where the sand turned to glass under the morning light. She had described how her people used ground resonance to detect footsteps, and how even the heartbeat of an approaching soldier could give away. A position the humans had listened and changed their plan. They carried no heavy armor, no loud engines. They had learned to move like ghosts through their own soil. Mira's voice came softly through the comms, stay low. Keep your sensors cold, we go. Live only if they move. First, her tone was calm, but Ayan knew she was ready for anything. He felt the same cold anticipation deep in his stomach. He looked at Taris and said quietly, if this is a trick, it ends badly for both of us. She met his eyes and said, then let us both live to see it end well. Her words were not defiant. They were weary and full of something that sounded like hope. The convoy reached the edge of the flats and stopped. Ayan climbed out with his rifle slung low, scanning the horizon through his visor. The salt plain shimmered white and still, but he knew the quiet was a lie. Taris pointed toward a cluster of low dunes. The ground hums there. She said that is where the sentinels hide. Ayan crouched and felt the vibration. Under his boots, faint and rhythmic like a distant heartbeat, he motioned to Mira. and she ordered the rear units to circle east. They set up mirrored shields low to the ground, reflecting the sky and confusing the thermal scans that the Vakari used. It was a trick humans had learned from old desert tribes, using light to hide heat. Minutes passed, then a shadow moved on the ridge. An insect-shaped drone rose from the sand, its wings glinting blue. It scanned the area and sent out a pulse that rippled. Through the ground, Ayan watched the signal bounce off the mirrored plates and return, scrambled the drone, tilted as if confused, then fired a burst into empty air. The humans waited, holding their breath. Then another drone emerged, then two more. Soon the sky above the ridge buzzed with them. The trap had sprung, but not as the Vakari expected. Mira whispered now, and the team activated small jammers disguised as stones across the plane. Waves of interference rolled outward, turning the drones. Blind from the dunes came the first wave of Vakari troops, tall armored figures moving with inhuman precision. They opened fire, but their aim faltered as their sensors failed. The humans did not shoot back. They used bursts of light smoke and redirected heat flares to make ghost targets appear 10 meters away. Ayan moved through the haze, guiding his team with silent hand signals. The plan was not to destroy, but to capture. They needed proof of what Taris had told them. When one of the Vakari soldiers charged too close, he tripped a trap made from recycled power cells that released a blinding flash. His armor shut down and Ayan's unit swarmed over him, binding his limbs in polymer rope. Taris stood exposed on the ridge, calling out in her native tongue, her voice echoing through the plain. She spoke words Ayan could not understand, but her translator whispered fragments: surrender, warmth, mercy code. The enemy hesitated. Their formation broke for a moment. One soldier raised his weapon toward her, but another grabbed his arm, stopping him. The confusion grew as she kept speaking. Ayan realized she was not just translating. She was invoking something sacred in her people's creed. She was telling them that she had been spared by humans, and that to strike her down would break their own laws of fire and life. The battle slowed and then stopped. The drones hovered, uncertain. The Vakari commander stepped forward, a massive figure with twin crests along his armor. He looked at Taris. With a mix of fury and disbelief. "Traitor," he shouted. The translator crackled and hissed over her next words. "I serve the one who showed warmth," she said, "and that makes me stronger than you." The commander aimed his weapon, but Ayan fired first, not to kill, but to shatter the sand beside him. Shards flew into the air, and the shock made the alien stumble. Mira's voice came through the comms: "Hold fire, maintain position. No kills, repeat, no kills." The Vakari soldiers hesitated again. Their commander roared, but they did not move. He looked around, realizing his trap had failed. His prey had not only survived, but turned his own code against him. One by one, the drones powered down, hovering silently above the battlefield. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise of gunfire. Ayan stepped forward, rifle lowered. He said in a steady voice, "We can talk now." The translator carried his words across the field, and the commander looked from him to Taris, his hands shaking with rage and shame. He turned away, signaling retreat, and the Vakari vanished into the haze, leaving behind a few disabled drones and the fallen sentinel they had captured. When the dust settled, Mira approached Ayan. Her armor streaked with ash and sweat. She looked at Taris, who was kneeling again, not in surrender this time, but in exhaustion. "You were right," Mira said to Ayan. "She led us straight through their trap." Ayan nodded. "She saved more lives than any weapon could." Mira crouched beside Taris and said, "I don't understand your people's ways, but you earned something today." Taris looked up slowly, her eyes dim with fatigue. "What did I earn?" she asked. Mira stood and said, "The right to choose what comes next." They spent the rest of the day salvaging what they could from the battlefield. Taris helped disable the captured drone, showing the humans how to remove its memory core without triggering the self-destruct system. When the data streamed into the console, they saw maps and command logs, proving her story: a fleet waiting in orbit, a plan to take Earth not for conquest, but as part of a ritual of dominance to prove worth to the rest of the Galactic Council. Mira sent the evidence up the chain, and for the first time in weeks, Earth Command had more than rumors. They had a strategy. As the sun sank low, Ayan sat on the crawler roof, watching the sky turn red. Taris joined him, still limping from her injuries. She said quietly, In my world, when a trap fails, it becomes a lesson. He smiled. Sounds like something we could use. She looked at him with that strange alien sincerity and said, then perhaps our worlds are not so different. He nodded, not looking away from the horizon. Maybe not different, just both trying to find warmth. In the cold, the wind carried the smell of salt and burned metal, and somewhere behind them, Mira's team worked in silence, preparing for whatever came next. The first battle had ended without death, and that alone was something new in a galaxy that had forgotten how to stop fighting. The warlord's proof. The message from orbit came at dusk when the sky was split between fading gold and deep blue. The outpost lights flickered as every channel across Earth filled with the same broadcast. The face of a Vakari warlord loomed across every screen, the metallic ridges along his skull, catching the light of distant stars behind him. The glow of a great ship pulsed like a burning sun. He spoke in a slow, steady tone that carried the weight of command translated through every language on Earth. His words were simple and cruel. He declared that humanity had broken the code of war by keeping one of his soldiers alive, that mercy was weakness, that warmth must be taken, not given, and that he would prove his creed by challenging any human to face his champion. In single combat, he said if no one answered the challenge, Earth would surrender within one rotation. His image vanished, leaving only static and silence across the base. Captain Mira slammed her fist on the table, her voice cutting through the noise. He is playing for fear, she said. He wants us to doubt our own victory. Ayan stood nearby, watching the horizon where the first stars began to appear. He had seen enough battles to know how morale could break faster than bone. The younger soldiers looked pale. Even the older ones stayed quiet. Everyone had seen what a Vakari warlord could do. Their duels were not mere contests. They were performances of power broadcast across fleets to remind allies and enemies who ruled through terror. Tara sat at the edge of the command room, her hands bound not from distrust, but as a symbol to other humans that she was still under guard. She listened to the words echoing from the replay and said softly, "He does not seek your surrender. He seeks your silence. If no one answers, he will say you have no voice, and if someone dies, he will say you have no strength." Mira looked at her sharply, then said, "And if we answer and win, he will lose his right to lead." Taris nodded. "That is our creed. Defeat in an open challenge strips honor from the victor, and the chain of command falls until one with greater strength claims it." She hesitated, then added, "But he will not make it easy. His champion is not one of the legion. He is of the old caste, bred for ritual war." Ayan asked, "How can anyone fight that?" She turned her gaze to him and said, "By remembering what you fight for, not what you fight against." Mira ordered the command feed to open a response channel. The signal would reach the warlord within minutes. She turned to Ayan. "You brought her here. You showed her mercy. You seem to understand her code better than any of us," she said. "The warlord wants proof of our weakness. I want to give him proof of our will." Ayan frowned, realizing what she meant. "You want me to fight?" Mira nodded slowly. "You are the only one who faced them up close and lived." She paused and added, "And she will guide you." Taris looked startled, her eyes widening. She said, "That is madness. He will kill you." Ayan answered, "Maybe, but not before the galaxy sees what we are made of." They spent the night preparing, not with grand weapons or heavy armor, but with understanding. Taris explained the rules of the duel to Mira and Ayan. No hidden attacks, no ranged fire, only direct combat under the light of two suns. The duel would be observed by both sides, and the first to yield or die would decide the fate of the treaty. Mira watched every gesture, every movement. Taris used to demonstrate how her people fought and countered. Ayan practiced until sweat ran down his arms and his breath came ragged. He was faster than the Vakari, but weaker in raw strength. He would have to rely on balance and patience, not brute power. When dawn came, the challenge site was chosen, an open stretch of glass-like sand east of the outpost where the wind cut clean and the sun rose double bright through the haze. Both sides gathered along the ridge. Human soldiers on one end, Vakari warriors on the other. The air shimmered with heat. Ayan stepped forward, wearing light armor marked with the flag of Earth. He carried no gun. Only a short plasma staff charged at both ends. The Vakari champion strode out from the opposite side, his armor black as obsidian, his eyes like molten silver. He carried a curved blade that pulsed with slow blue fire. The warlord himself watched from above, his face projected across the sky for all to see. Tari stood behind Ayan, close enough for him to hear her voice through the comms. She said softly, "He will strike 3 times to test you. Do not answer until the 3rd strike. That is when he commits his balance. The first 2 are for show." Ayan nodded, understanding that patience could win what speed could not. The signal horn echoed across the valley, and the duel began. The champion moved like a storm. His first strike tore through the air where Ayan's head had been a second before. The second blow came faster, grazing his shoulder, the heat searing his armor. He did not swing back. He stepped aside each time, forcing the champion to adjust, forcing him to think that his enemy feared him. Then came the 3rd strike, the blade descending in a perfect arc. Ayan dropped to one knee, twisted his staff, and caught the weapon against the sand. The plasma flared, and the champion stumbled, thrown off balance. Ayan rose and drove the staff into the ground, creating a burst of light and static that shorted the Vicari's visor. The crowd on both sides gasped. The champion roared, swinging blind and wild. Ayan moved in close, using the sand itself. As his ally, each movement was measured and calm. Every dodge used the champion's weight against him. He remembered what Taris had said, that the Vicari saw warmth as strength and cruelty as weakness. So he fought not to kill, but to disarm. He struck, once at the knee, then once across the blade, knocking it free. The weapon fell and hissed into the sand. He held his staff ready but did not finish the blow. The champion knelt, gasping through his damaged respirator. From above, the warlord's voice thundered, "Finish it, human." Ayan looked up, breathing hard, and said through his helmet mic, "No, he yields." The translator spread the words across the valley. The Vicari soldiers looked to their leader. The warlord's hands clenched around the rail of his command deck, his face twisted with fury. Tari stepped forward, shouting in her own tongue, "The duel is ended by our creed. He has shown strength and restraint. The code demands you honor it." The warlord glared down, his pride fighting his own laws. Ayan waited, his heart pounding. The silence stretched until finally the warlord spoke, his voice cold as steel. "I will honor the code, but the war is not over." The crowd broke into murmurs as the Vicari withdrew, carrying their wounded champion. The humans gathered around Ayan, cheering, but he did not smile. He looked at Taris and saw tears glinting on her metallic cheeks. She said quietly, "You have done what no one from your world has ever done. You have made a Vicari kneel without hatred." Mira approached, placing a hand on his shoulder, and said, "That was not a victory of strength, it was a victory of soul." He looked up at the empty sky where the warlord's image had vanished and said, "Then let's make sure the galaxy sees it that way." That night, under the twin moons, the outpost glowed with quiet light. The first transmissions of the duel were already spreading through the network across both fleets, humans and Vicari alike, watching the moment when a human chose mercy over conquest. Tari stood by the sea, her reflection trembling in the waves. She whispered that her people would never see warmth the same way again. And behind her, Ayan said softly, "Maybe one day they will teach it instead of fearing it." She turned and met his gaze. The war was not over, but for the first time since the invasion began, there was a path that led away from destruction and toward something both species had forgotten how to believe in, a peace born from courage and restraint, warmth. In the cold of war, night had fallen thick and heavy over the desert outpost, and the ocean wind carried sand and salt into the barracks where the humans and the one alien guest tried to rest after a day that had shaken the whole planet. The duel had been broadcast across the fleets, across the hidden stations of the Vicari Empire, and even among their people who watched from worlds the humans had never seen before. The sight of a human fighter sparing a Vicari champion instead of killing him had spread like wildfire. Half of the Empire called it weakness. The other half called it proof that humans carried something the Vicari had long forgotten, a warmth that was not bound to blood or victory. Inside the command room, Captain Mira studied a wall of transmissions scrolling fast as code from both sides of the war. She could see confusion spreading through the Vicari lines, their commanders sending mixed orders, some demanding vengeance, others calling for restraint. It was the first fracture in what had once seemed like an unbreakable army. She turned to Ayan, who stood beside her, still bruised from the duel, his left arm wrapped in a rough bandage. She said the warlord is not retreating. He is gathering the northern fleets. She paused, looking at the long line of red icons that represented ships in orbit above Asia. He wants to make an example of us. He will attack the coast cities within days. Ayan nodded, his face calm, but his eyes dark. He said, "Then we make an example of mercy again, but louder this time." Taris entered the room quietly, her armor partly repaired but her posture heavier as if each breath cost her more strength. She said, "I listened to the outer channels. The warlord claims you cheated in the duel, that your staff carried forbidden code." Mira frowned. What code? Taris met her gaze and said, "The code of restraint, the belief that ending a battle without death is a greater show of strength than victory by blood to him. That is a virus more dangerous than any weapon." Ayan gave a short breath that sounded like a laugh. "So he calls mercy corruption?" She nodded softly. "Yes, and he will come to burn it out." They gathered the team around the map table. The light from the screen painted their faces in cold blue. They needed a new plan, something beyond defense, something that could speak to both sides of the war at once. Mira spoke first, her tone calm and steady. "We have a window." She said, "The Vakari network is built on shared resonance. Signals like sonar through space. If we can hijack that channel, we can send a message not to their command but to their people. A message they cannot censor." Ayan looked at Taris. "Can it be done?" She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "It can, but it would take someone who understands both languages, human and Vakari resonance." He realized what she meant and said, "You mean you?" Taris looked at him and said, "And you, because you carry the sound of mercy, and that cannot be translated by machine." They began their work that night. The command center became a forge of noise and light. Engineers linked the communication dishes to oceanic hydrophones that Mira's science team had once used to track deep-sea whales. Ayan remembered that Mira had said, long ago, the oceans hear more than we do now. That same network would carry the signal across the water and into the sky. Taris tuned the frequencies using her own voice as a reference. Her tones rose and fell, like music, her words shaping patterns that shimmered through the air. The humans listened silently. None of them could understand the language, but all felt something in it that stirred the chest, a strange mix of sorrow and promise. Ayan watched her work, his body sore from exhaustion, but his focus sharp. He asked her quietly, "When you said you would warm my bed, you meant loyalty, not surrender?" She smiled faintly. "Yes," she said, "in my culture, to share warmth is to promise life, not pleasure. When I said those words, I offered the only thing left to me, my service, my truth, my breath." He nodded, understanding that what had begun as an act of pity had turned into something deeper, a bridge between entire species. When the system was ready, Mira gave the order to transmit. Taris stood at the center of the array, her hands pressed against the console, her eyes closed. Ayan stood beside her, his voice ready to follow hers. She began to speak in the old Vakari tongue. The translator did not convert it into words, but into pure tone, a melody that rose from the speakers and rolled out over the ocean. It carried into the sky, touching the orbital sensors of both fleets. Ayan added his voice, repeating the words in simple human language. "We fight not to conquer, but to remember that warmth keeps worlds alive. We fight not for dominance, but for survival shared." He spoke slowly, clearly, every word an echo of hers, and together their voices became one. Across orbiting fleets, the resonance struck like thunder. The Vakari ships paused their targeting systems, flickering as the signal fed back into their channels on their worlds. Civilians turned toward the sound coming from the network that once carried only war commands and propaganda, now filled with a strange music that spoke of balance, of choice, of the right to stand without chains on Earth. The humans stepped out of bunkers and shelters, hearing the same tone vibrating through the air like a heartbeat. The sea responded too, waves pulsing in rhythm to the sound as if the planet itself listened. In the warlord's flagship, chaos erupted. Officers argued over whether to shut down the network or trace the source. The warlord himself stood silent, watching the pattern of waves across his tactical screens. He saw something he could not explain, his own code collapsing under the logic of its reflection. It was not an attack. It was a mirror showing what his creed had become. a hollow fire consuming itself. Back on the surface, the energy surge overloaded. Several system sparks flew across the room and the lights dimmed. Taris collapsed forward, her body shaking as the feedback loop burned through her neural implants. Ayan caught her before she hit the ground. She whispered weakly, "It worked. I can feel them listening." He held her close, saying, "You did it, you made them hear." She looked up at him, her eyes faintly glowing the way stars flicker before dawn. She said softly, "No, we did it." And then her head fell against his shoulder, breathing shallow, but steady. Mira ran diagnostics as the storm of signals faded, leaving a silence that felt almost holy. She looked at Ayan and said, "The network reached beyond the fleet, beyond the Empire. Even some of our deep relays repeated it the entire quadrant." "Heard your message," he nodded and said. "Then maybe now they will understand." She looked at Tari, still unconscious, and said, "If she lives, she will be the bridge they cannot destroy." Outside, the wind calmed the stars clearer than they had been in weeks. The humans took turns keeping watch while Ayan stayed beside Taris. She stirred once, her voice weak, whispering in her own tongue, a phrase the translator caught faintly. Warmth shared. Warmth returned. He stayed there till morning, when the first light touched the sea. The air was still and quiet, as if both earth and sky were waiting for the next sound in that moment. The war felt suspended, balanced on the edge of something new. Not peace yet, but the first fragile shape of it, formed by two voices, one human and one alien, speaking together in the same rhythm trial. Before two suns, the dawn that followed the great signal was unlike any dawn before. The air itself seemed alive. The sky painted in colors no one could name. Faint streaks of green and gold shimmered above the sea, as if the planet was breathing along with the message that had crossed the stars for the first time in living memory. There was silence on every channel. No threat, no command, no screams of war. It was as if both fleets, human and Vakari, had drawn a collective breath, waiting for the next move. The outpost that had once been a fortress now felt like a place of worship, filled with tension, hope, and fear in equal measure. Ayan woke to find the world calm, but heavy with expectation. Captain Mira stood by the open hatch of the command room, looking out at the horizon, her face pale from sleeplessness. When he approached, she said quietly, "They answered." Ayan felt his pulse quicken. Who answered? She turned, the screen toward him, and there it was, a transmission from orbit. A symbol burned in gold light across the display. It was the mark of the Vakari Council, not the warlord, the ruling circle that had not spoken to any human since the invasion began. The message was short and carried no threat, only a demand for parley at midday. Under the twin suns, they would send an envoy to test the truth of the human words. By noon, the sea was blazing silver, the heat sharp enough to make the air waver. The humans gathered along the coast, their ships holding position just offshore while drones scanned the skies. A low hum filled the air, and a shadow passed overhead as the Vakari envoy descended. The craft was shaped like a long blade, its hull gleaming with shifting colors when it landed. The sand beneath it melted to glass from the heat vents. Tari stood beside Ayan, wrapped in a simple gray cloak, her eyes still dim from exhaustion, but her posture straight. She whispered, "This is not a trap. They have come because the council doubts the warlord. They will test your creed and mine." Ayan nodded. He could feel the gravity of what was coming. If this meeting failed, there would be no more chances. The envoy stepped from the ship, a tall figure, clad in armor that shimmered between metal and living tissue. His voice carried without amplifier, rich and calm. "I am Keyleth, second son of the council. I have come to see if the humans are truth or noise." Mira stepped forward, her tone steady. "You will find we are both." Ayan could see Tari's tense slightly. She leaned closer to him and said, "He will want proof through trial. They do not believe in talk without contest." He asked quietly, "What kind of trial?" She answered, "One of strength and spirit. No weapons, no deception, only what you are." Keyleth looked across the gathered humans and said, "In our creed, a claim of balance must be proven before the twin suns when heat and shadow share equal space. You will face a trial, and we will see if mercy is strength or disguise." Ayan stepped forward before Mira could speak. "I will take it." Caliph studied him. The warrior of the duel. He said, the one who spared my kin. He nodded very well. The trial will be witnessed by both councils, and its result will bind both races. They moved to the flat rock platform by the sea. The wind carried salt and heat, the twin suns climbing slowly until their light burned white across the water. Caliph removed his armor until he stood bare, armed, his skin marked. With glowing lines that pulsed with every heartbeat, he gestured for Ayan to do the same. The human dropped his outer gear, keeping only a light harness. His muscles tense from strain. Tari stood at the edge of the platform, watching every movement. Her eyes flicking between them, she whispered to Mira, "They will test not the body but the will. The first to break rhythm loses." Caliph began to circle, slow and deliberate, each step measured. He raised his hands and struck not a blow, but a motion, like a wave of energy. Pushing air, Ayan braced himself, letting the force slide past rather than meet it directly. The trial was more dance than fight, a flow of balance between aggression and control. Ayan followed his rhythm, keeping steady, his movements grounded, each step echoing the calm he had learned from Tari's. She watched with silent pride, the wind catching her cloak like a banner. The duel grew faster, the air shimmering with heat, the twin suns meeting overhead, marking the balance. Of the day, Caliph's strikes came sharper, each one designed to provoke fear. Ayan met everyone without anger, every deflection, a refusal to hate soon. The rhythm began to shift, Caliph's movements lost precision, his strength great but his balance faltering. He shouted, "You show no fire, human. Where is your will to dominate?" Ayan answered, his voice carrying over the roar of the wind. "We do not need to dominate to survive." The words hit harder than any blow. The Vakari envoy stumbled, his power collapsing like water poured onto stone. The energy field around him flickered and dimmed. He fell to one knee. The watching Vakari guards murmured in disbelief. Their code demanded that he yield when his rhythm broke. Ayan stepped back, breathing hard, not victorious but steady. He extended his hand. Caliph looked up, eyes burning with confusion and something close to respect. He hesitated, then took the offered hand. Rising to his feet, Taris stepped forward, her voice strong despite the exhaustion. She faced Caliph directly and said, "Now you have seen it, strength and restraint, warmth and balance." He turned to her and said quietly, "You were right. Exile, your creed has not been broken. It has been reborn." She bowed her head and said, "It was not I who rebirthed it. It was they." He looked at Ayan, then at Mira, and finally at the gathered soldiers and said, "The council will hear this. The warlord will be recalled. His command will stand trial before the creed of fire." The message spread faster than light across channels and subnets within hours. The fleets in orbit began to shift, some withdrawing to neutral stations, others deactivating weapons. For the first time in months, human satellites picked up signals, not of war but of communication. Fragments of Vakari voices speaking new phrases, warmth shared, balance held. That night the humans gathered by the water fires flickering along the beach, the air filled with a strange peace that felt fragile but real. Ayan sat beside Taris, both watching the stars shimmer above the sea. He said softly, "What happens now?" She answered, "Now. The council decides if they will follow their code or their fear." He nodded and said, "And you, what will you do?" She looked out toward the horizon, her expression distant. "I was once a soldier of conquest," she said. "Now I must learn to be a soldier of peace." Mira joined them, her face finally showing relief. She said, "Whatever happens up there, we gave them something they cannot erase, a choice." Ayan looked at her and said, "Sometimes that is all it takes, one choice." She smiled faintly, then turned her eyes to the stars for the first time since the invasion began. They did not look like eyes of an enemy or a commander, but of someone who believed in tomorrow. As the twin suns sank beyond the ocean and night returned, the quiet hum of the waves carried the sound of a world that had survived its own fire. The trial was over, but the future had only begun. And above them, in the dark, the fleets that once prepared for destruction now drifted in silence, their weapons cold, waiting for a new command, one not of war but of understanding. Bond, sealed by mercy. The twin suns had long set and the world lay wrapped in darkness. Touched only by the faint silver light of distant stars, the air along the coast was cool and still, as if the planet itself was resting after months of strain and battle within the outpost. Lights glowed dim and gentle, no longer sharp and cold. Like before, human and Vakari soldiers stood together in quiet conversation, some guarded and cautious, others openly curious. The sound of languages mixing filled the night. The rhythm awkward but real. The war that had begun with fire and fear had ended in silence and understanding. Ayan stood on the observation deck looking up at the ships drifting in low orbit, their lights blinking against the black sky. They no longer hovered in formation or pointed their weapons downward. Instead, they moved like ships of exploration, mapping and scanning instead of threatening. Each light in the sky marked a small surrender and an even greater victory behind him. The door hissed open, and Tari stepped out, her cloak rustling in the wind. She was healing now, her wounds wrapped in smooth blue fiber. Her skin had regained its faint metallic glow. She looked stronger but softer at once, her eyes meeting his with a calm that spoke of both gratitude and burden. He said quietly, "I still wake up, expecting the sky to burn." She smiled faintly. "You're not alone in that," she said. "My people have never known a dawn without orders to conquer." Below them, Captain Mira was in conference with a holographic projection from orbit. The Vakari Council's image shimmered over the command table, their many faces solemn and proud, yet edged with humility. Ayan and Ta'aris could hear fragments of the discussion. The terms of the new treaty were being finalized, both sides agreeing to withdraw heavy fleets from planetary orbit to establish a neutral corridor between human and Vakari territories, and to begin a shared scientific mission on Earth itself. The Council's speaker said, "We will send vessels not for war, but for study and understanding. The era of the Creed of Fire ends here and another begins." Ayan could see Mira's jaw tighten with restrained emotion. She answered with the quiet dignity of a soldier who had fought too long for this moment. "Earth accepts and welcomes it." When the Council's image faded, the outpost erupted in cheers for the first time in months. Soldiers laughed, some cried, others simply sat in silence, letting the weight lift from their shoulders. Mira came up to the deck and said to Ayan, "It is done. The treaty is signed." He turned to her, half smiling, half disbelieving. "That's it, then we survived." She nodded. "You did more than survive, you changed the code of two species." Taris listened quietly, her gaze distant. "I never thought I would see this day," she said. "In my world, warriors who fail are erased from memory. Yet now I am remembered not for the blood I spilled, but for the mercy I accepted." Ayan looked at her and said, "Mercy is not weakness. It is a kind of strength you build instead of take." She nodded slowly, as if tasting the words and finding them true. Later that night, the three of them walked along the beach, the sea reflecting the faint glow of the sky. Drones hovered nearby, scanning the waves where small Vakari crafts descended, bringing supplies, not soldiers. They carried medicine rations and technology meant to rebuild the coastal towns destroyed in the first strikes. It was strange and beautiful to see aliens working beside humans, lifting crates, fixing towers, and repairing. Machines that they had once aimed to destroy. A young technician approached Mira and handed her a small device, saying the Vakari call this a heart stabilizer. They use it to steady reactors. Mira smiled and said, "We can use it to power our field. Hospitals tell them thank you." The technician nodded and ran off. Ayan watched the scene unfold and said quietly, "I never thought we'd see them help rebuild what they tried to burn." Taris replied softly, "Neither did they." She paused and added, "Mercy was your weapon. They never had a defense against it." He looked at her, his voice low. "You were the one who carried it into their hearts." She smiled and shook her head. "No human warmth lit the fire. I only carried the flame." As dawn approached again, the first ships of the new alliance rose from the water, sleek and silver, carrying banners marked with both human and Vakari symbols. The design showed two circles, interlocking, one red, one blue, with a single white line joining them, the symbol of balance and warmth shared. Mira watched the ships ascend and said, "The first joint mission leaves for the outer colonies today." Their task is to seek other worlds and teach what we learned here. Taris asked softly, "Will they believe you?" Mira replied, "Not at first, but they will see what mercy can build when it is stronger than fear," when the ships vanished into the brightening sky. Taris turned to Ayan, her expression unreadable. She said, "My council wishes me to return with them as envoy between our worlds, but I do not know if I should." He studied her face and asked why not. She looked at the ocean and said, "Because my heart beats faster on this world. It is louder here, full of sound and chaos and life. I thought I understood warmth, but it was not until I met you that I felt it. Truly," he said, "if you go, it will not fade, it will follow you." She smiled and said, "Perhaps, but the Vicari needs someone who remembers how it began." He said, "Then, go teach them, and if they forget, remind them that mercy once saved them from themselves." She reached out, placing her hand against his chest over his heart, and said in our creed, "This means bond, not ownership but memory. I will carry this warmth as my oath." He covered her hand with his and said, "And I will remember that mercy can turn even a weapon into a bridge." She stepped back, her eyes bright in the morning light, and for a moment the air between them shimmered as if touched by unseen energy. When the transport arrived to take her back to orbit, she turned once more at the ramp. The wind pulling her cloak around her, she said goodbye. "Ranger of Earth, may your fire never turn to ash." He answered, "Goodbye." "Tyaris of the Vicari, may your warmth never fade." She gave a small nod, then disappeared. Into the ship the engines rose in a deep hum, and the craft lifted slowly, rising toward the golden sky until it vanished into the light, and stood there long after it was gone, the sea wind carrying the scent of salt and sunrise. Mira joined him. Quietly beside the surf, she said, "She'll come back someday." He nodded, "I know, and until then we keep building." He looked out at the horizon where the first joint outpost was already forming, cranes, moving machines rising. He said softly, "Maybe this is what it means to be starborn, not the power to conquer, but to rise from fire into light." As the sun climbed higher and the waves glittered beneath it, the war became a memory, the kind that would live not in tales of destruction, but in the stories told by children about the day humans taught the galaxy that mercy could be stronger than steel, and that even across stars warmth can be shared and kept alive forever.